Collision Course is back. Schedule B on Revolution Radio every Saturday night, 6 to 8 p.m. You get outer space. You get honest answers, real researchers, truthful answers, and a place to engage with questions. Take part in the discussion. Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com hosts Collision Course every Saturday from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific Time.
I'm Reverend Medium Tracy Lockwood, and I'd like to invite you to join me as I discuss life from a medium's perspective. I'll be talking about insights that I've gained through readings, with topics like your guides, angels, animal communication, past lives, our transition, and the afterlife. We'll take a deeper look at the metaphysical meanings of symbols and totems, and I'll give you some practical exercises to help you develop your own natural psychic ability. Join me on From a Medium's Perspective.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Well, it's time to stumble down the road with host Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff and co-host Jenny Vaught as they carry stones, dig holes, and wield their shovels along the way. On Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. This is not a seated event. As they talk, run, stumble, carry, dig, drag, laugh, fight, sing, and pray, dance and kick and scream, and oftentimes fall. Hey, is that a stone or a buffalo check? Now, here are your hosts for the next 2 hours on carrying stones and digging holes. But I won't be there.
The hell I won't.
Hello.
Hey everybody, this is Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff, and this is Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show. And we are at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you can find my page on my show by going to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, and clicking on the schedule, which is on the left-hand side. Click Schedule A, then scroll down through the shows in Schedule A, and you'll find Carrying Stones and Digging Holes at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where the bee has pollen on its legs and it's flying towards the flower. And then also, while you're there, you may want to help us because we are listener supported, and help us with funding. And you can also click on the funding page. We do have advertising. We also have heirloom seeds, and you can donate, so that everybody at Revolution Radio, all the hosts and all the people who operate it, we all volunteer and we operate it for free. And we bring all these insightful educational information. And there are all kinds of different hosts with all kinds of different shows on just about anything and everything. So anyway, help support us, help keep us up and rolling. We have been a network since 2011, and I just joined this last year. So anyway, do the click and help us to stay afloat. All right, today I have a return guest, Shannon Brown, and she is she has a FB, which is Facebook page, Ecosystems Regeneration and Artisans. So, hey, it's her second time on, so the conversation will probably be a little bit different. We'll probably talk about a lot of other things than the basics. But Shannon, do you want to give people kind of an idea about the work that you do?
Yeah, certainly. So my company, Ecosystem Regeneration Artisans, which you can find by searching Eco Regen, REGEN, Artisans, ARTISANS, on Facebook, is basically all about protecting the water through what we do with our landscapes. That doesn't just necessarily mean water conservation in terms of using less water for irrigating turf grass, so that's certainly a part of the mission, with converting turf grass to native plants that are adapted for that region and therefore don't require any more supplemental watering than just the rainfall that comes naturally to that area, but also doing things that actively improve our watersheds, hence the regeneration part. Sustainable just really isn't enough. We need to get better than where we're at. And so to regenerate our watersheds, we can do techniques like rain gardens, which help to sink the water down into the soil and recharge our groundwater supply by digging down a basin and catching the water in that basin, and then letting it sink into the soil. You're essentially recharging the groundwater sponge that is underneath our feet. So that's what I talked about the last time I was on the show. And today we also, on the other show, talked about native grasses and their role in helping that soil sponge, and also the endangeredness of the native prairie where those grasses are from. So I'd like to talk more today about native grasses, which are kind of one of those unsung heroes, or would-be heroes of climate change, if we turned our attention to using them to help us sequester carbon from the air. Essentially, the native grasses are carbon pumps and water pumps. Their deep roots help sink carbon from the atmosphere down into the soil, and water from the rain also down into the soil, which is where we want to store both of those. I hope that I'll be joined later today by a guest, Katie Avery. She'll be talking about another unsung hero of climate change, which is fungi. There's a lot that mycorrhizal fungi and fungi that grow along the roots of trees, and also that help with decomposition, can do to help break down and sequester carbon from the atmosphere. She's been delayed and isn't quite with me yet, but is on her way and should be here by the end of the show to give her 2 cents and perspective on another thing that we can each individually do, plants that life that we can encourage, because fungi aren't actually plants, but life that we can encourage to create a regenerative world for ourselves, where we're actively fixing our biggest problem and our biggest threat through our individual actions.
Great.
That's kind of an overview.
Great. All right. So, what is it that you want to what do you think right now is really, really important that you see in the environment? And, maybe even tie it into what people can do within their own, small yards to be helpful and assist broader landscapes.
Sure. I think that the first thing, if I was a homeowner, I'm not a homeowner yet, but hopefully someday I'll be able to put down my own roots. But if I was a homeowner and I had land and was looking for ways to transform my living situation into not just a sustainable lifestyle, but a regenerative lifestyle where I am giving back to the earth and giving back to the ecosystem around me to make it more robust and resilient to climate change, what I would do would be start out by learning the native plants of the region I'm in. what naturally grew there before my house was built, before this housing development came in and devastated that ecosystem and put down a bunch of non-native turf grass and removed all the habitat for birds and butterflies. How do we put back the habitat for birds and butterflies? Growing up in Houston, I saw a lot of subdivisions go in, they'd tear down a forest, the birds and the butterflies and all the deer, the raccoons, all the wildlife that was there would be in this situation of becoming homeless based on humans building new housing there for ourselves. So thinking about what other beings are around us and what they need to support themselves. We need food, water, shelter, air to survive, and there's no difference in the animals. They need food, water, air, and shelter, but they don't go to the grocery store to get their food. The native plants that are in the ecosystem are what provide them with food. And the diversity of those native plants is really critical because daisy is only going to flower in the spring, perhaps, and then what are the butterflies going to eat in the fall? If there's only daisies in that ecosystem, they'll be starving in the fall. So in Texas, what I do in the landscapes that I create is really make sure that there's something to eat all year round for the wildlife that we want to attract. If we want hummingbirds, then, well, we need to have food for hummingbirds in all of the growing season that we have here. So February through November, what's flowering? And it's going to be a different thing every month or every 2 weeks or so. So making sure that we use not just one type of plant, but as much biodiversity as possible is really critical. So it starts with getting to know your place. You know, if you have a home, know what plants are native to your ecoregion, know what animals are native to your ecoregion, and know what they need to support themselves. Like monarch butterflies have been a big umbrella species that there's been a lot of discussion of. They need nectar plants to feed themselves, so lots of flowers that are going to be flowering in the season that they're around, but they also need a place to raise their young, and there's only one plant that they'll raise their young on, and that's the milkweed. So there's these really complex relationships that have been going on in our world for millions of years. And when we remove the plants from these ecosystems, we damage those relationships and leave our wildlife hungry and homeless. And that's not an okay thing to do. So a lot of my life's work is devoted to undoing that damage and giving back the plants that call this place home so that the animals are welcome back home as well. So step one, I think, for people is to bring home native plants, but also the way that you plant them matters. If you're planting on raised beds, the water runs off of that. Whereas if you plant on a bed that is sunken into the ground, the water is going to sink into that and go down into the soil rather than running off. So that's one of the ways that we can take care of the water is by sinking it into the soil, because the soil is such an excellent filter that is really, the fungal life, the bacterial life that's in the soil is what does a lot of the work of transforming and cleaning dust and poison into things that are healthy and living. It's pretty magical. That's about what I have to say about that.
Okay. All right. So, and so, do you want to explain like the importance of having, pollinators such as butterflies, bees, and birds, and also, making sure that they have proper habitat. Like one of the things that, that I've learned just with birds is birds can actually transplant areas. I mean, there are seeds and things that go through their digestive tract that don't get broken down, that they eat, that they, as they're flying over areas or wherever they're hanging out, they can poop out, and it actually helps the seed to develop in the soil. So they also are like planters, and they can help with the environment and landing on things and helping to pollinate it as well. So I include the birds, and bats are pollinators. But can you tell us why it's important to have, your thoughts on why it's important to have like insects as pollinators that are thriving in areas, and maybe some ideas on how to create, more of a backyard habitat that can help them to flourish.
Sure. Well, beyond just the idea that we live in a biodiverse and beautiful world and want to have other creatures around us that we can observe and interact with. Things like songbirds are so beautiful to hear. Imagine, Rachel Carson asked this question a long time ago. Imagine a world without songbirds, never hearing a songbird sound again, never seeing a hummingbird ever again, never seeing a butterfly ever again. They deserve to exist in their own right because they're here, but also the way the intricate web of life that we're part of works is that when you remove species from that web, it ripples out. What we do to everything else, we also do to ourselves. So damaging our bee population damages our own ability to have food. A third of the food that we eat needs to be pollinated by bees, specifically. So if we do something to damage the web of life where we lose our bees, we lose a third of our food. Songbirds, having them around to spread seeds is really important for our ecosystems. And it's important for our own health. There's a concept called biophilia. The biophilia hypothesis was developed in the 1980s by a scientist named E.O. Wilson. And E.O. Wilson basically said that humans have an innate love for nature. It has health effects on us when we are around nature. When we're deprived of nature, that has health effects too, and negative ones. Higher blood pressure, increased depression, increased aggression and crime, all sorts of things that increase stress, increased risk of heart disease. Our health is linked to the health of the world around us. It means so much to just be able to sit and watch a bird doing its bird things, hopping around and eating seeds and singing and feeding its young insects. It's a beautiful part of the world that we live in, and without the birds around to eat the insects that they feed their young, we'd have a lot more insect pests around. And we'd have to deal with those insect pests somehow. And most of the ways that people deal with pests are with pesticides and chemical poisons. So less birds would mean people would feel the need to use pesticides more. And in a lot of places where people have pest problems, the pest problems exist because there's an ecosystem that's out of balance. People have to resort to using poison when they've damaged the ecosystem to the point that the control measures for the pests aren't there. So thinking of birds as a control mechanism for our insect pests that bother us. A lot of people here in Texas have scorpion problems. Well, lizards and birds both eat scorpions, but if you have left an environment that is deprived of everything that lizards and birds need and only has what scorpions need, and scorpions don't need much. Scorpions are perfectly happy with rocks and sand and concrete. If that's what you have around your house is rocks and sand and concrete and nothing else, certainly you're going to have some scorpions show up and try to call that home. Probably a lot of them. And without having the birds around to eat those scorpions and the lizards around to eat those scorpions and frogs and toads, you're going to have a scorpion overpopulation problem. And at that point, most people are going to call up the exterminator and get them to spray something that's toxic to the rest of the web of life. Not just the scorpions, but it'll also affect the butterflies, and it'll also affect the beneficial insects. So then you end up with this cascading vicious cycle of removing more and more life from this web. And we can talk more about the health effects of using those sort of insecticides and pesticides in our own homes, and what that means for what we breathe in terms of our indoor air quality. And, you know, having a kid crawling around and touching stuff and then putting their hands in their mouth, they're going to get low-level doses of that. And if you're doing treatment on a regular basis, that affects more than just us. That affects, if a bird did happen to come by and eat an insect that had been poisoned, that bird ends up with more poison accumulated in its body than the insect had. This is like Rachel Carson talked about in Silent Spring, which was about the crisis of DDT in the 1960s and 70s, where they noticed that all the birds were disappearing because they couldn't reproduce. Their eggshells were becoming too fragile, and every time they would sit on their egg, it would crack open and just be like an egg in your frying pan. It would be dead.
Yeah,
and that was happening because of the insects.
Yeah, we have like in Nevada, because of all the mining, you know, so much mining is taking place all over the state, but most of the rivers are contaminated not only with one type of mercury, but two types. And the fish in most of the lakes, you'll see signs that say, you know, you can catch the fish, but you don't want to eat them. You know, you don't want to drink the water out of these lakes. But we had a hard time when the bald eagles were coming in from the mountains, when they were starting to repopulate the area from the Sierra Nevadas. And they would go out to this one lake, Lahontan, and all their offspring always died because they would put up a nest and then they would pull the fish in from the lake, and it would make the shells soft. If a baby did survive, then the baby wouldn't live very long because of the mercury contamination and poisoning from the fish.
Right. It has an effect on not just the people, but everything else too. And we're, as people, able to insulate ourselves from the damage that we've done to the environment through our grocery stores and sourcing things from far away. We don't have to deal with the environment directly around us that we've poisoned necessarily, but maybe we should have to. And maybe we'll come to a point where we will have to, because at a certain point, things need to get cleaned up. And that's where the role of fungi and the role of native grasses come in too. There's been a study from up in Canada that talks about which heavy metals and which hydrocarbons certain grasses can remove from contaminated sites. The field of bioremediation is growing rapidly because at a certain point, we as people do need to be responsible and clean up the messes that we've made.
So I was going to tell that Shannon is, just for the listeners out there, in case they keep hearing all this noise. Yes, she is outside, and she's attending in case you can hear flute music and drumming and stuff in the background. She's at the local native powwow. So she's got the powwow going on in the background while she's talking to us. So we get like a in case listeners were going, what the heck is that sound in the back? So we're getting some good sound energies and sound vibrations in the background as well. So
it's good stuff. I'm here on the shores of Spring Lake in San Marcos, which is this beautiful spring-fed lake, and there's been humid habitation in this area for 13,000 years. So it's great to be here today and be part of that continuation and continue to take care of these springs and keep them flowing and keep them flowing clear. So we're so blessed with clean, clear water that flows out of our hills. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, well, I'm jealous. No, I'm jealous. I'm jealous. So I was I just wanted to kind of like talk about this. So the other day I was watching I like this guy called the Fullerton Informer, and he lives in LA, and he's like, just a regular citizen activist fighting against the 5G, which is a whole deal, and a lot of the stuff that's going on in LA. And it turns out that his family has lived in the LA area for years and years and years and years. And his, like his grandfather was a farmer down there, and then his father was a farmer. And then he learned some farming stuff. He's probably like in his 60s, 50s, 60, somewhere in there. But one of the things is he was kind of on a rant the other day on the YouTube channel from like 8 months ago, talking about how LA is like getting no rain, like zero visible rain. And so he talked about famine because none of the people, and he's driving through LA, it's a concrete jungle. It's one fast food restaurant after another. And he said people here have no idea. Some people have never even left the city, that where food comes from. That all, and as he's driving along, he'll point his camera over and he'll go, well, that used to be, a giant orchard. This was some of the best farming land in all of California at one time, right? And it's like all covered over with concrete and fast food restaurants, and that all of this stuff is brought in. And he was talking about how when California's droughts are no longer going to be able to sustain farming. And that's going to be a huge impact, because I think like a huge amount of the food that travels across the United States and services people in their grocery stores or their fast food restaurants or whatever else comes from California. And also a huge, large amount of organic food comes out of California. I know like in Nevada, where I'm at, we're a food desert. We just have alfalfa, cattle, and dairy, commercial dairy. We're not even allowed the FDA. We're the only state where the FDA in 2008 made raw milk illegal. Like, it's like contraband and drugs, right? We used to do, for a while there, we had California farmers bringing us in raw milk, and we would like literally be in alleyways, like going, okay, $6, getting the milk out of the trunk to, give to people. But people got kind of tired of that. So Nevada is a desert. Down in Pahrump, the word Pahrump is a native word. It means artesian wells. And there used to be tons of, natural water in the desert, and a lot of people farmed a long, long time ago. The native people were, not farming, but they were doing types of agriculture with, native plants and eating the native plants. But, if most of the farmers markets that we get here in Nevada are from California. Like we have like maybe one farm that sells their food openly. And that is, I think Latin Farms out of Yerington, which is an hour and a half away, which they have, kind of like a really nice organic little food production there. But, we're like the 5th largest state. How does that one farm going to sustain one of the 5th largest states?
Yeah.
And the population. I mean, so our environment is a really, hard environment to grow in. And we've kind of been not growing and not being responsible with our landscapes and our environment, or even growing any kind of food, because we've been relying on California. And now, we have this massive, massive drought. They said that something like, it was an unbelievable amount of trees now in the Sierra Nevadas are completely dead. Like half the forest is completely dead. All the trees.
That's tragic.
It's so tragic because, we can talk a lot about the geoengineering, but also without the microbial mass in the soil, rain ceases to come. You know what I mean? It ceases to, and having natural landscapes where like California is all paved over and all that water flows out into the ocean now, all the rain that comes down, the fresh water, it all flows back out into the ocean. They don't have any natural landscapes where they can actually allow, large amounts of water when it does rain to actually absorb into the environment, into the landscape, and back into the aquifers. So the aquifers are also going completely dry.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that scares me the most in Texas, too. We have a real problem with our aquifers drying up, people building homes and paving over the recharge feature. We're breaking the recharge feature. We're breaking what puts the water in the aquifer that allows us to drink it later when it's not raining. And that's a terrible, terrible crime. It's a terrible thing that we're doing, but it's tremendously profitable for the people that are making the developments, but tremendously damaging for the people who are going to continue to live there, especially if the growth continues here. We're in a situation where there's it becomes scary when you start to think about there not being enough water to go around. The city of San Antonio is spending $4 billion to make a pipeline to go from Bastrop, where there's less population, to San Antonio, and San Antonio is over the Edwards Aquifer and gets their drinking water from the Edwards Aquifer. And Bastrop's not in the Edwards Aquifer at all, but they still have groundwater over there. And it's just a situation where San Antonio can't meet the demand of the number of people that are there based on taking care of, the water supply that they have and taking care of that water. And it stems from the way the city was developed there and the number of people that are living there. For people that have never been to Texas and never seen the San Antonio River or seen the San Marcos River, I want you to imagine two rivers that were sisters back in the ancient times. They were twins. They looked pretty much the same. Both of them were clear blue. You can see 20 feet down, fish swimming along. The San Marcos River has a very unique wild rice that only lives in the San Marcos River. And the San Antonio River, which is also equally clean and clear, doesn't have the wild rice, but there's people living along it, and there's beautiful fish and all sorts of wildlife, great blue herons and otters. And it's all spring-fed. It all comes bubbling up from the hills. Even when there's a drought, there is water coming out of the ground. And when there's not a drought, there's places where a hillside will be soggy. You'll just walk along and step into a pool of water just because that's where it happens to bubble out of the earth. And it's tremendously beautiful, and it all feeds into those rivers. And then along the way of development and colonization, the San Antonio River has turned chocolate brown. You can't see your feet in knee-deep water anymore in the San Antonio River. And this is a river that you used to be able to see down 20 feet, and the water was crystal clear blue, the most beautiful turquoise color you've ever seen. And it's just a tremendous loss that the San Antonio River still looks that way. And I'm tremendously grateful to be here at the San Marcos River, where it still looks that clean and clear and is well taken care of. But there's a threat that comes to the San Marcos River. There's pressure to grow here between Austin and San Antonio and build more homes and make more impervious cover. And what I mean by impervious cover is essentially rooftops and paved driveways, parking lots, all of that. The water that falls on those has to go somewhere. And so it flows across the surface of the parking lot. It picks up all of the nasty oil drippings. It picks up all of the heavy metal shavings that come off our brakes every time we touch the brakes. And all of that gets sent into a drain, and that drain feeds directly out into our waterways. So all of the heavy metals and all of the hydrocarbons, all of the oil, all of the gasoline ends up in the water, our river, just because of that drainage system that we've engineered to deal with our rainwater. And this area is really prone to flash flooding. So we do have to do something to direct the water and give it a place to go when we get 8 inches of rain in the span of 24 hours. And that's not even an astronomical amount. That's a, that would be a good hard day of rain, but that wouldn't be mind-blowing for here. So we do have to give that water somewhere to go, but we don't necessarily need to push the water away from us and send it downstream as quick as we can and completely unfiltered through concrete pipes. We need to take care of that water and make friends with it and hold on to it, harvest it, hold it close to us, hold it in the soil. The soil is a great place to store water. It protects it from evaporation and it cleans it. And the water eventually flows downhill underground through the soil and comes out in the river perfectly clean. That's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful process. And it's a process that's not well understood by the average person. And I really think that we need to start having that conversation more about what is our flood infrastructure like? What is our water infrastructure like? Where does our water come from? How is it cleaned? How does it come from the rain and end up in our taps? What's that whole process like? What's it being treated with? Who's treating it? What are we using to clean it? Where does it come from? Where does it go? And how do we take good care of it? We have floodwaters here that could be held and cleaned by the soil microbes and directed down into the soil and into the aquifer by grassroots, but that doesn't work if it's turf grass. And so much of our pasture is being converted to turf grass for people's lawns, but also turf grass for cattle, because the coastal Bermuda grass is a easy grass for ranchers to practice very lazy grazing practices on, whereas our native bunch grasses that are very deep-rooted compared to the Bermuda grass. The Bermuda grass maybe has about a foot of root depth, whereas our native grasses have easily 9 feet, sometimes up to 15 feet of root depth. That's a really big difference. And the grasses have a unspoken function in our ecosystem. They're unacknowledged heroes of our water because those roots act as channels, as guides to direct the water deep into the ground and help it recharge the aquifer. If you replace our big blue stem and our bushy blue stem and our eastern gamma grass with Bermuda grass, you've lost 10 feet of root mass that's going to be helping put the water back. You're breaking the recharge mechanism and making it so that the water bank account beneath our feet is no longer getting income, but we're still drawing out more and more from that bank account and putting ourselves in a really scary, dangerous situation where we could go water bankrupt. And when you go water bankrupt, there's no one to bail you out. That's just when things start dying. So we need
that's
to
when,
be
and that's
aware
when,
of that.
and that's when, there's amazing, extreme famines where people die.
Mhm.
Animals die. Everything in that environment dies. So what she's talking about, with the root systems and all that, is she used the term recharge feature. So those are what she's explaining to you are the different features of the recharging system. The roots guiding the water down. Also, the roots break up, hard soil and make it make the routes to go through to fill up the aquifer. The roots also filter a lot of, like she said, there's plants that can be planted that are natural plants that clean up the environment. For example, this summer I learned that the Hopi sunflowers that I was growing, particularly sunflowers in general, but the Hopi sunflowers like to pull the lead out. So, they have a mechanism to figure out what to do with it. So also the sunflowers, feed the birds and also are transplanted and, can be part of a natural landscape along with a lot of other things. So when she's talking about recharge feature, she's talking about how all these plants work together, how the land works together, and how it aids in cleaning and purifying water, holding water, so that it doesn't get ran off in flood environments. And so the ground can be saturated, and then it's like a big filter and the water goes back into the aquifer. There was something else I was going to say. Oh, topsoil. So, when we allow these environments to go south, and we allow like the topsoil, I think we're like 45% now worldwide of all topsoil is gone. And the deal is that the topsoil is what plants like, what they want to grow in, what you're going to grow your food in. And in some places, say, for example, if the topsoil gets run off, you have, 10, 20 feet of topsoil that's been run off your property, and you have to plant some native plants in rock and clay, and they need to drop a 15-foot root. They may not be able to.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Until that topsoil is replaced. I know with trying to grow comfrey in some places as a medicine, for skin and health and blah blah blah, it has to drop a 15-foot root. And so if it can't drop a 15-foot root, it cannot actually create the proper medicine that it has within it and to give to people and be used, right? Because it may not make it if it can't drop a 15-foot root. So we also have to consider the topsoil that we're losing every time these developments scrape off the topsoil to create a development. They're actually cutting off the most important and most valuable asset that we have.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a wonderful quote, and I can't remember who it's by, but it goes like this: despite all our accomplishments, we owe our existence to the first 6 inches of topsoil and the fact that it rains. Without topsoil, without rain, we can't exist. We can't have food, we can't have water, then we can't exist. Everything comes from plants and animals and the soil. And we have to take care of that. If we take care of our soil and our water, everything else will fall into place. But we're not taking care of our soil and our water. Like you mentioned with our development practices, we scrape the topsoil off and put down sandy loam that's often referred to by gardeners as the red death, because it doesn't have the microbial life in it that's necessary it's dug up from way deep down in the earth, and it doesn't have the healthy microbial life that's necessary for plants to grow. So you end up with these very, very sickly plants, and you can't, if the plants are sickly, then they're not going to support you. So it's essentially turning areas that could be productive farmland into places that are completely unproductive in every way except for that they're providing housing for humans. And all the food for those people will come from thousands of miles away and need to be shipped, and that food will travel 3 times the distance of those people during the year. And it kind of becomes this very ridiculous thing when, if we had developed it in a smart way with low impact to the soil and with attention paid to keeping the native life that's in that area alive too, and keeping the trees to encourage there to be rainfall, because the trees do create this cycle where they call in the rain for us. If we maybe put less homes and caught all of the water off of those roofs and left space for there to be community gardens so that people could grow food there, or there could be local farmers there, then that food wouldn't have to be shipped huge distances. We could have local food, and we could develop in a way that every house, every rooftop, every driveway, and every street was designed so that it captured all the water that would run off of it got captured in a tank, a cistern, or got put into a rain garden in the ground, or went into a detention pond. And then you could have a pond in the community that would attract life to it. And you could go there and see dragonflies and fish and see birds and just enjoy being on this beautiful planet. There's a beautiful world out here. There's a beautiful natural world here. And why destroy that to create something that's boring and lifeless? People talk about, oh yeah, I moved into the suburbs and sold out, and it's so boring here. It's such a lifeless monoculture. I look at these, it's lawn after lawn after lawn, and it all looks the same, and then it has one oak tree planted in the front. Yeah, one, that's boring for people to look at. It's just boring. And it takes a lot of water to keep those lawns alive. And two, if you're a bird flying over, a butterfly flying over, and imagine that you've migrated down to Costa Rica because you're a painted bunting, which is one of the most beautiful birds we have in Texas. The male is red and blue and green and yellow, just a stunning bird. Google it. Male painted bunting. But anyway, they migrate to Costa Rica. And so if you've flown to Costa Rica, you've had a beautiful time down there enjoying all the tropical fruits and that tropical environment while it's cold here. And then you fly back to Texas for the springtime to breed. And you always come back to this same specific spot where you know that there's a beautiful little pond and a willow tree. And you come back and there is no more willow tree. There's no more forest there. The pond is surrounded by these strange boxes. And you've seen the boxes invade other places too, but now they've come and they've taken your nesting grounds. That's a terrible thing to come back to. And that's what our culture is doing. That's what our society looks like. Every new housing development is stealing homes from birds. And I saw it behind my house in Houston. There was a pair of hawks that would always come there, and they would always nest there. And then one year they clear-cut the forest to build a housing development. And the hawks did come back, but they only came back for a very short time, and then they left again. And I can't imagine the heartbreak of losing your nesting grounds, your home that you've come to every year for all the years that you've been a breeding adult, and to see it gone and to wonder what to do after that. Because they're still going to want to breed and they're still going to want to do their bird stuff and live their bird lives. But where do they go? And they run into this situation of flying around and looking, and where is a good, healthy spot to live and raise young? And in a lot of cases, there aren't any more spots left because there's been so much human encroachment of subdivisions and replacing that healthy habitat that can support a biodiverse community with just this lifeless desert of a landscape full of houses that are boxes. And it's really sad to think of it from the animal's perspective. Think of the road. The deer isn't crossing the road. The road is crossing the forest, and the deer is just trying to get to the other side of its forest. The deer aren't coming into your yard and eating your landscape plants. You took the deer's home and then laid out a buffet for it. So, yeah, it's going to come eat those plants, especially if the home that it has now doesn't have many plants left to eat. So we're acting in a very selfish way. And it's not good. It's not good to be that selfish and to steal the homes of others like that. Whether they're other people or other animals, it's careless and it's selfish, and people, for the most part, don't even see it or think about it. They see the new dream home that they've wanted to have, and they move into it. And it was just built that last year, and they don't know what was there the year before. They don't know that there were hawks there before. They don't know what painted buntings were there before, and they won't know because by the time that they've moved in, the hawks and the painted buntings that used to come there will have had to move on and try to find somewhere else to live. So
Agree.
that's a bit of the narrative and the story of what.
Yeah. Well, the thing is
happening.
it happens the same in Nevada, and it's people say, well, out there, there's an area that I used to, because, they've really overbuilt this whole area. And it's actually, heated the area up. A lot of people don't realize, like, global warming could be caused from concrete and pavement, because it doesn't have the grasses and the moist dirt and the trees and everything to cool it down, right? To protect the ground from the sun. The sun could very much well be, used as a mirror. I mean, people are more likely to burn their feet on hot pavement or concrete than they are on grass that's warm.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's like a no-brainer. Do you see? And because we're taking away all of the natural positive carbon areas, we don't have anything to take down the negative carbon and turn it in and make it into a usable carbon. So,
Right.
It doesn't have to be like, as crazy as people make it. The more that you pave over areas, the warmer that area is going to get. And for us, when I was growing up here in Reno, Nevada, we're at the base of the Sierra Nevadas, and we had ice on the ground all winter long. We had like ice potholes, because it would be super cold here. Now we have all these people in the last 10 years moving into the area because we have 4 seasons. Okay. We never had 4 seasons before, right? So we never really had 4 seasons until after 1983, when the infrastructure started to explode. And people started moving in and buying second and third homes in the area, and now we have actual areas where they're coming out into the desert area, and people will say, well, who cares about that area? It's just sand. It's like, no, there's areas that I've walked in with my dog over the last 9 years that have bunnies and all kinds of birds, little teeny birds living in the sagebrush, and all kinds of insects. And, people would be shocked at the amount of wildlife that's there. Yeah. And they're like, who cares about that sand? Well, that sand is a topsoil. There's actually things growing in it called rabbit brush. You may not like it, or sagebrush or whatever else, but these are plants that grow here, and these are the plants that the animals live in and how they live their life. And we have these huge land mover machines that just shock me. They like gobble up the earth. That's how it looks. They're gobbling up the animals. They're gobbling up the topsoil. And so even though it looks like sand, if there's stuff growing in it, yeah, there is a kind of sand, but maybe right underneath that is something that's developed over time that you can't get back. And that is going to be like a topsoil layer. And they scrape off, I was watching them scrape off like up to 4 to 5 feet of that off to flatten it out. And like you said, bring in the sand. And a lot of times I found out that sand that they bring in, or, the cover that they bring in, not only, is it hard to grow things in, or they call it the Red Death or whatever, but they're also radiating it and sterilizing it, and they call it sterile sand. So if you plant stuff in it, nothing's going to grow. Like, I go around all these, developments, and I look at the landscaping that they've put in, and people think, well, it just needs more water. It's like, well, no, because the stuff that's underneath that they've planted these things into, plus all the fresh concrete, which actually steals the oxygen out of the atmosphere, and then the pavement and all the oil that's on it, has thoroughly contaminated these areas and houses. And dirt in them. Right.
And it is possible to heal that soil that's brought in, and heal the soil in those communities. So if you are living in one of those suburban homes and that's, where you're at, there's things that you can do. You can buy what are called mycorrhizal inoculants. And a mycorrhizal fungi is essentially a fungi that partners up with plants and grows around the roots of those plants. And they have this symbiotic relationship where the plant pulls from the, uses carbon from the air and sunlight and oxygen to produce growth and to produce sugars. And the fungi get to feed on those sugars around the roots of the plant. But the fungi, the mycorrhizal fungi, actually help the plant by transforming nutrients that are in the soil that are inaccessible to the plant because they're just in the wrong form, and cooks them up into something that's delicious for the plant to eat. Think of it as like people eating raw meat. We can't eat raw meat, right? If someone handed you a raw chicken leg, you'd be like, ugh, gross, I'm not eating that. Well, the plants are in the same situation. There's all these raw chicken legs in the ground around them. They can't eat them. What the mycorrhizal fungi do is essentially act as a chef, cook up that chicken so that it's delicious and full of all sorts of herbs and the things that that plant needs to nourish itself, and that helps it grow, so you can get more growth out of your plants and more health out of your plants.
Yeah, so we're going to commercial. We'll be right back in 4 minutes. Hold that thought.
Will do.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Hello, all you good-looking people out there in Revolution Radio. This is Mario. I invite you to join me Thursdays at 6 o'clock for This, That, and the Other. It's a show about you, it's a show about me, but ultimately it's a show where we try to have a little bit of fun. We discuss important topics, and we do our best to be apolitical. So I invite you, put on your favorite pair of comfy sweats, your smoking jacket, and grab a beverage of your choice, and join me Thursday evenings at 6 o'clock for This, That, and the Other on Revolution Radio.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
From the astral realms to the physical plane, the halls of power to the walls of home, the multiverse to the innerverse. All will be haunted by the ghost in the machine. I am Steve Zerloff, the ghost in the machine. Mondays, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Studio B. Exclusively here on Revolution.Radio.
This is Barbara DeLong, host of Nightlight Radio, inviting you to join me on a cosmic journey, exploring a metaphysical montage of spiritual material, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between, including spiritual readings for those who seek enlightenment. Let Nightlight provide you with equal measure of light, love and laughter, insight, wisdom, and inspiration. Monday nights, 10 to 12 p.m. Eastern, right here on Studio B, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
It's Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff, host of Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And I'm in the 1 p.m. Eastern slot on, you can go to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, and look on Studio A and look at all the amazing hosts that we have on Studio A. Scroll down to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, click on the B, and you can get some information about my show and me, and if you want to contact me, you can find how to contact me there. All right, so before we ended on the first hour, Shannon Brown, my guest, her return interview, second return interview. Anyway, we were talking about microorganisms and inoculation, microorganisms inoculations, and about how they can actually turn what is unavailable to trees as nutrient into beneficial nutrient for your environment around your home. So where would you tell people to look online to be able to buy or find the inoculations?
That's a really good question. I have sourced mine from a local nursery, but I imagine that most local nurseries aren't going to have it available. I don't really have an answer for that question in terms of where people could find to buy mycorrhizal inoculant, but you can certainly search mycorrhizal, that's mycorrhizal, and essentially myco means fungi and rhizal means roots, so it's fungi around the roots. Searching for mycorrhizal fungi inoculant on the internet should help you find some. What I like to use and have used in my landscapes is called mycostim, mycostim. That's been really successful for me. So I have this rain garden that I built at a house. It's in a new development out in Wimberley, Texas, and they have a deed restriction on the properties there that it says that everyone has to have a cistern to catch the rainwater runoff from their house, because there's been some horrible flooding in Wimberley in the past. And as recently as 2015, there was a 40-foot wall of water that ripped through town and picked up ancient 500-year-old cypress trees and ripped them up by their roots and sent them careening downstream, where they crashed into houses and killed 13 people. So there's a real concern about flooding in this region. We live in Flash Flood Alley, which is termed that because we do have some of the worst flooding in the United States and in the world. But we've made it far worse with our development practices. So this particular homeowners association development has required that all of the homes catch the runoff in cisterns, so that every time it rains, rather than a huge amount of water just flushing off those roofs and going into the stormwater sewer and unfiltered gushing into the river instantly and then causing this massive flood of water all at once, they catch that water in cisterns instead, and then it can slowly be released into people's landscapes through drip irrigation and methods like that. So it's a really, really cool concept. And one of the homeowners there wanted to take the next step and turn what would be a lawn into a rain garden, which is a series of basins that catch that rainwater and hold it in the soil while it's raining and then slowly sink it down into the soil. And I inoculated that rain garden with this mycostim product that I was mentioning. And the plant growth was absolutely phenomenal. One, because of the amount of available soil moisture, because it is a rain garden. So every time that we had rain, say 2 inches of rain fall in an hour, what would normally happen in a lawn, especially a lawn that's been compacted by heavy machinery during the construction phase, that water would just sheet flow rapidly across the surface of the land, go into the street, and then run away. Well, the rain garden catches that 2 inches, and it sits and it pools there, and it might be there for a day or so, making these beautiful little ponds, and then that water sinks down into the soil and is in an underground pocket that is in the soil, and that helps the plants to grow. So also the mycorrhizal inoculant has this property where it makes it so that the plants can access the nutrients better. And the amount of growth that I saw from these plants just blew me away. So we planted them at 4 inches. So essentially these are teeny tiny little sticks that are, fit in the palm of your hand. And just yesterday I was there doing some maintenance, and some of those plants were at least 2 feet taller than I am. So they're, 7 feet tall plants and that amount of growth in a year is pretty phenomenal. I've been working in native plant gardens in Texas for the past 15 years. And what happened in this garden in the course of one season blew me away. I would expect it to take 2 or 3 years for plants to have the root mass to get to 7 feet tall in one growing season. That was just phenomenal. It speaks to, one, what happens for plants when you have water available to them. When they constantly have water access, they can grow a lot better. But also, when they're able to access the nutrients that are around them, and you have good compost underneath them, and you have healthy inoculant around their roots, they can just grow so much better. It would be like, a kid, like if a kid is malnourished and doesn't have access to good, healthy food, they're not going to grow very well or very fast. But if they have, all the right nutritional support and healthy diet and all of that, they grow up fast and, tall and strong and healthy and vibrant. So it's incredible the mycorrhizal fungi are something that's completely invisible to our eyes. We cannot see them. And the water that's in the rain garden is only visible right after it rains. And then the water in the rain garden becomes invisible. It's under the ground. And the grass roots that pull carbon from the atmosphere and sink it into the ground, they're invisible. All you see is the top of the grass. All of these invisible things are what makes the magic happen. They're what helps life be robust and vigorous and resilient to all sorts of changes and hardships and struggles. So part of what I'm speaking to is things that you're not going to see, but you'll see the effects of them if you know what to look for.
Yeah, and,
it's an amazing world we live in.
yeah, well, it's amazing when you get the right product. So having gone through biodynamics school and education at Rudolph Steiner College, and then I interned at lots of biodynamic farms. You can contact Rudolph Steiner College. Actually closed after 30 years in Sacramento. It was a gem, which is really bad for the whole area and biodynamics. But biodynamics is a serious study of microbial mass processes, starting with their composting, and then the structured water and the stirring of it and binding it, and then using it as sprays on the land to increase like massive microbial mass, which is, what she's also talking about. So I think that if people out there are interested, the Josephine Institute, I think it's like in Wisconsin or someplace like that, you can look it up. They sell for really inexpensive. You'd want horn prep manure, a horn manure prep, and then you'd want the barrel preparation too. And then what you do is you get them in the mail, and then you stir them for about an hour, and it binds it with the water, the microbial mass and everything. So you want to use purified water. And then you're going to put it in a clean sprayer. Obviously, you don't want to spray any pesticides or herbicides or anything like that on your property after you use these. And you need to use them after you've watered, and you want to keep the landscape a little moist. But you can definitely get those products, and they're cultivated. They're put into like horns and put into the ground for a year, and they're cured in high density microbial rich soils, and then you just spray them on your land. And I kind of have a story about that here in the desert. When I was doing a lot of work with the Biodynamic California Association, after I went to school, I was using a lot of the preparations that you could buy through Steiner College and Harold Hoven, that were, the horn prep and just all the barrel prep. And so I had a friend of mine who'd been trying to grow a garden in her backyard, in the desert for 20 years, and just had never really had any success with it. And so I told her what to do. We brought in some compost, some dried horse manure and stuff like that, and put it over the area. I told her to water it, to keep it moist. And then I came in with the horn and the barrel prep and stirred it and sprayed it on there. And then she kept it wet and then planted it. And she had so much food in 1 year. She said it just shocked her because of the microbial mass. And that's what, her whole landscape was missing. And so she had so much food, she was literally giving it away to everybody for the first time in 20 years of, messing around with this garden. So, microbial mass is like the key to a lot of restoring what we need to restore. And people don't realize that in our bodies, we are made up of microbes. And inflammatory disease is a microbial problem. And so when people don't have a lot of microbes in their bodies that come from the environment, come from the food that they're eating, because everything's sterilized, you get chronic inflammatory disease. And inflammatory disease is the heart of all diseases in the body that will kill you. So your body is the same way. You have microbial density in your body, and it cleans, like especially in your bloodstream on the microbial level, you have all these little worms and stuff that you can't see that are non-visible. If you go to a dark field hematologist doctor, you'll be able to see those processes in your blood. They can kind of figure out what's wrong with you and your health because of, you have no microbes usually. But the microbes eat all of the bad stuff in your body like a compost, and then they return it back to a positive metabolic, food back into your cells, right? So it transfers. But then what happens is if you don't have the replacement of healthy microbes, the microbes will just disintegrate you as compost. They'll take you down. And so what people are facing right now a lot is the same thing as what the earth and the soil is facing, is the lack of microbial mass inside their bodies. It's like children who work and live on farms, don't have allergies, even if they're non-vaccinated, all these other things, they're super healthy kids versus the kids that live in like urban environments that are away from actually, digging worms up and playing in the soil, maybe eating a chicken turd, and those kinds of things. Those people are going to be a lot healthier because they're getting microbial mass into their system. So, okay.
Yeah. The microbes matter in terms of the health of our soil and our health too. And that's one of the tragedies of our farmland that's, the monocultures of industrial agriculture that are sprayed with huge amounts of herbicides for weed control, is that those herbicides end up killing, and the fertilizers too, end up killing the microbial life. That the fertilizers are a replacement. They're like they're kind of like a drug that, will act like what the healthy microbes would have produced, but they'll give this huge dose of it all at once, rather than the microbes which are creating it and feeding it to the plants. So that's one of the reasons that our farmland that has gone to industrial agriculture, you can't just suddenly stop putting herbicide and stop putting fertilizer on it and still expect to be able to grow things, because that web of life, the soil food web that lives in that soil, has been so damaged by the use of those herbicides and the use of those fertilizers that the healthy microbes don't live there anymore and can't support the plants, can't grow around the roots and provide them with the right nutrients anymore. So we have to put back these invisible pieces of our ecosystem as well as the visible pieces. It's not just, plants that we can see. It's also things that are invisible to our eyes, but can be in a solution of water. And that's why the practice of taking water from one place and using it to spread out into another place, it makes sense from a microbial perspective in terms of transferring a healthy ecosystem to a place that may need some regeneration.
Yeah, and the same thing happens when you don't have any microbial mass, and then you start having diarrhea profusely in the hospital. Is what do? They inject somebody else's turds into your colon. It's like the same idea.
Right, it's inoculating it. It's putting back the microbes.
Yeah, so, sometimes people don't get, how these are the same ideas and the same thoughts. Okay, so...
Yeah, I need an ecosystem.
Yeah, no, and the thing is you can't thrive if you don't have the ecosystem outside of you to support you.
Right, or inside of you to support you. It takes both.
Exactly. So it's good to, have your dog, have its butthole up against your face in the middle of the night in bed every once in a while, get some microbial mass going in there. Just kidding. Everybody knows that has dogs that sleep in their bed, every once in a while you wake up and it's just totally inappropriate. No.
What happened there?
Yeah.
Move around, dog. Move around.
Yeah. So, yeah, my dog likes to try to steal the pillow. So, she'll do whatever she can to get my pillow. Anyways, she's a hunk of bunk of burning love. Anyway, so, let me see. I just wanted to talk about maybe, when you're planting, one thing that I see a lot of, and maybe you can talk about this too, since, we're trying to give those homeowners, that could make a really big difference with their yards and their landscaping. And, I'm all for, the xeriscaping in Nevada, as long as you keep the sagebrush and the things that would have naturally grown in the yard, those would be really a great thing. And then, plant some trees that would be kind of native to the area. But when I have to go out, and I don't do it as much as I used to because I'm not doing back food. I used to do for 7 years backyard food production builds, where people got 20% of their food fresh out of their yard in a full a circle system that I could make 20 year round. but I'm not doing them anymore because once they stopped paying me, to help take care of it and replant it and look in on it and all these different things, a lot of the people just let it all go. And it looked like, apocalyptic event had hit it. And in some cases, I had to rescue chickens that we had introduced into the landscape so that they could eat the bugs down and, all these other, issues and fertilize the lawn naturally. You want to have a lawn. Great, let's put some chickens on it. Let's get rid of the fertilizers and pesticides, and then, the chickens can graze out on the lawn and around the yard and clean up whatever. And in a lot of cases, I had to rescue the chickens because I'd go back, a year later, and the people weren't feeding the animals properly. They had them in very small pens. The chickens had, pulled all of their feathers off and other things. And so because people lost interest, and when nobody else was taking care of it, they didn't really take care of it. Even though I would spend a whole year all season long teaching them how to make biodynamic compost, teaching them how to use microbial mass, to fortify their yard, how to get around using a lot of these other products, like if they had bad aphids, how to go get ladybugs and praying mantises and move them into the environment, during the period where the aphids would explode from other yards. But one of the things that I always saw over and over again was that people would buy the same type of ornamental trees that were not really indigenous to America at all, that produced no food and no medicine at all. And then they didn't companion plant any of the plants. So they didn't give it, so they'd plant, like, say, there was this Buddhist temple that planted right on the road, between the sidewalk and the road in the desert, these Japanese, Buddhist temple flowering trees, right? Well, these trees all cracked and burned on the one side because they also put rocks around it. And so the heat intensity on these trees was so intense that it literally cracked them and burnt them on one side. And literally opened them up, and they were majorly disease-ridden. And the people didn't want to really replace the trees. They didn't really want to take them out. And it was trying to explain to them that, the bugs and the disease are actually spreading to all the other older, mature trees in the area. And so sometimes I think when people decide to do their yard, that maybe instead of buying your house, maybe buy it without a yard. With the processes of being able to put in and do research and create your yard in a way that's going to be beneficial for your area, beneficial for the other landscapes in your area, beneficial for the other, trees in your neighborhood. And then also don't forget, if you're going to plant some of these forest trees, don't forget to put other things in around the basis of them, because these kinds of trees get burned easily, and they live, amongst other plants, as a community, that they get food from, and helps the soil, and also helps them from having so much heat on the base of their trunks, which, ultimately kills them. So do you have any things that you see in nature and landscapes that are mass production that could be done a lot better, that can give our listeners some ideas of, maybe things to look at and thoughts of maybe what they may want to plant to help maybe their landscape?
Sure. I think that what you're pointing to with doing some companion plants around the trees is exactly on point. In a forest, the understory is kind of the most important story. There's a lot of life that goes on beneath the canopy of the trees. An ecosystem that's just trees and short turf grass is an ecosystem with 98% of the life removed. There's so much more to a healthy landscape and a healthy forest and a natural area than just the trees. There's all sorts of other flowering plants that naturally grow beneath the trees, and grasses that aren't turf grass, bunch grasses that provide winter and other seasonal interests that isn't just in the spring. We can it's more beautiful to have something other than just turf grass and trees too. You get so much more out of it. You're going to see things that I like to think of my landscapes as temporal pieces of artwork. Temporal meaning time-based or seasonal. So each season in the spring, you're going to see a series of 10 different plants come into bloom, and it's going to look one way each day, and each day is going to be a little bit different. And that's part of the beauty of the natural world, is seeing these seasonal changes. It's going to look a certain way in March. It's going to look different in April. It's going to look different in May. It's going to look different again in June. It's going to look different in July. And by the time October comes around, you've seen that garden look 100 different ways. And there's still more to come through October, November, and December. There's bunch grasses that are going to turn red and have a big floofy top to them. And there's bunch grasses that are going to turn purple and become pink clouds in your landscape. And that's something that you wouldn't see if you just had a turf lawn and big trees. So the aesthetic beauty of this thing is one piece of it, but it's also a functional beauty. Each of those plants is providing something to the wildlife. Like, we still have monarchs migrating through here, even though we just had a really hard freeze. Well, when the freeze comes, where do the monarchs go? Where do those butterflies hide? Well, if you have a landscape that's designed for monarchs, it should probably include some tall bunch grasses in it, because when it gets cold, that's where they hide. They tuck themselves up among the leaves of the grass, and that shelters them and keeps them warm. It keeps that thermal mass low to the ground so that they don't freeze to death. So people talk about planting monarchs for milkweed. That's one part of the story. Yes, that gives them a place to raise young, but they still need a place to shelter, and that's the grasses. And then they also need a place to get food. So that's where your flowering nectar plants, the traditionally beautiful plants, are brought in. But there's so much more to it than just planting flowers for pollinators. Flowers are one piece of the puzzle. Trees are one piece of the puzzle, but we have to keep remembering the things that have been forgotten for the most part, and that's bunch grasses and providing cover and having shrubs that birds can shelter and nest in, because not all birds want to nest up in big pecan and oak trees. There are lots of birds that want to nest in shrubs like a wax myrtle here in Texas, or a sagebrush, or some birds like to nest in a cacti. So, or in cactuses, it all depends on, what species you're supporting, but the more plant life you have, the more animal life you can support. And that includes human life as well. Planting fruit trees that people can eat is a big part of what I do. Something that you talk about people that you worked with making these edible landscapes, and edible planting is a lot of work. Farmers do a lot of work with annual plants and annual agriculture. Annual meaning every single year you put that corn in the ground and the corn grows, and by the winter the corn's dead and you've harvested it. Well, there's also perennial agriculture, and perennial means that you plant it one time and it's there. A lot of my landscapes are with perennial native plants, meaning I put them in one time, and for the next 30 years they're going to be there, or more. If you plant a tree, it's going to be there 150 years. It's a perennial plant. So planting a fruit tree, that means that you plant it one time and it's going to produce fruit for you for the next 30 years once it's got its first couple of years in and has adjusted to the point that it's ready to bear fruit. You have to wait a little longer. You might not get fruit your first year, but will still eventually get fruit. And so having a kind of long-term vision of how our landscapes can help support us and the wildlife around us is really a big part of what I do and believe in. planting asparagus. You can put asparagus roots in the ground, and every spring for the next however long, you're going to be able to go by there and just snap off bits of asparagus and eat it. There's a garden here near me that's one of my favorite parts about it, is that in some seasons you just walk along and snap off some asparagus and eat it, and there's an abundance of it. So many people could eat out of that garden. So it can be more than turf grass. It can be so much more, and the maintenance component of doing perennial stuff is often much lower than the maintenance required for doing annual plants like corn and lettuce and tomatoes and stuff like that. Just because you're not having to dig every single season to plant stuff, which is fun too. And I definitely believe in having those annual growing spaces within these gardens. But I think that oftentimes there's a real place for having fruit trees, especially if you're a homeowner that has a busy 9-to-5 life and you've still got to take the kids to soccer practice, and you don't necessarily have time to spend 10 hours a week gardening. You only want to spend maybe an hour, if that, gardening. All you want to really do is be able to walk up to your pomegranate tree and break off pomegranates and put those in your kid's lunchbox. That would be the ideal life that I'd want to be living in a suburban home, is where I'd be able to, break off pomegranates from the tree, or break off oranges from the tree and things like that. And that's what goes in the kid's lunchbox.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's a lot of perennials out there that you can plant that can, start to generate your landscape. And then, you can add in, if you want, if you choose to have a few garden boxes to have some fresh lettuce. I mean, because this is the deal, the lettuce loses all of its nutritional output in 3 days after it's picked. So there's no place, no supermarket, at least in our area, that you can get, organic lettuce that isn't like at least a week old. So, I mean, you may get some water and fiber, but there's no nutritional density. So in some places, I like with my clients, I just try to make them grow a lot of greens actually in their garden beds. And then, whatever else that they want to grow in their yard. And then the other thing too, like for listeners out there too, is that, you can do some really amazing, hedges instead of fences that produce food for the environment. This year I learned about, it's called the desert peach. And it's this bush shrub that grows out that I had never seen before in Nevada, but it turns out it's kind of native. And it's kind of thorny, but once a year it grows these really beautiful flowers on it, and then it grows this big seed, and it has a little bit of flesh over it that looks just like a peach, and they're tiny. And the birds just go nuts over them, just like totally crazy. And those kinds of hedges you could put up instead of a fence line. And then you've got, an environment for your birds and your insects to hide out in. And then also it produces a food and a seed kind of a thing. So there's all kinds of amazing things that you can add into a landscape that can help the environment and replace, things that you don't really need, like a wood fence or right. Other kinds of things. And, it may take longer to grow, but you'll create like a major, amazing environment. I had here in the desert, which is sand. This year I messed around on a friend of mine's property with the old garden bed that he had that was fenced. And I did what was called a supportive, I call it a supportive garden area, where I plant a lot of other supportive plants that will come back, every year to help support the garden. And because of, what I had planted in it and everything else and all these medicinal plants and flowers, I had bugs that I couldn't even believe. I had these little dragonflies that were purple and blue. they were purple and turquoise and blue, and they literally were like clouds, and I'd walk through it, they would like disperse. And I had never seen anything like that in the desert. I had every kind of bee that you could have imagined, birds. And so I created this really unique environment for them. Lots of flowers. They came in for a lot of the flowering plants. So, if you also do a garden, you may want to do a support area, that has, flowering and seeding herbal plants and, maybe some, who knows what, some places for them to land, some bushes and shrubs. And obviously, if I had my own land, no, hopefully this spring I will. It'll finally be done. But, I would, the areas that I needed to cover up, I would plant a lot of these natural hedges that provide, food for that in the places that I want to grow food that, the wild animals want to eat. And then that way I don't have to spend a lot of money either. I can just, forage for seeds, plant the seeds and be done with it instead of having to spend huge amounts of money. And that's the other thing too, is like sometimes, we work a lot so that we can pay for things, to consume things, and we could work a lot less if we created an environment that was more nature based. Instead of building that giant fence, you could, put in some seeds that, in 15 years would be these incredible natural hedges. And all it would take for you to do is to go and forage out some seeds and plant them and, monitor their growing until they are, steady and established, which is mostly you just paying attention to it and not having to go buy anything or pay people. So sometimes, like people start growing food in their own yard or whatever, and it starts to replace, it cuts the cost of what you're spending, and it also can cut the cost of the doctor trips as well. So, okay, so we're moving into the last 20 minutes. And there's a reason why, people are sprouting up all over who are doing regenerative, agriculture and landscapes and all this other stuff, is because it's also amazing. People always want a miracle to happen in their life. Plant something.
It is a miracle.
Plant something and watch it grow. What's that?
Oh, I am surrounded by plant miracles for sure.
There's we have this summer that I just the stuff that I planted, and I really worked with indigenous plants from India and medicines and all this other stuff, and the support garden and the garden and everything. And this year it was just in the sand. It was old, I didn't really expect much out of it, and it was incredible what happened. Just by a little tender, loving care, a little bit of water, and just seeing how things go. And everything I sourced out, I paid for nothing. And you can go to my YouTube channel, Conscious of Economics and Urban Farm Project, and it'll show the process of this whole garden through the whole summer and little tidbits if you're interested. So we're in the last, we're in the last 20 minutes. And so what else do you want to talk about? What do you think is important to talk about? What do you want to bring to people's attention? Any kind of information or study or websites that you like to move and groove on? Kind of a thing.
Yeah. So in terms of, still talking and singing praises to the unsung heroes of climate change, which are the grasses, kind of bringing our heads around to this concept of we have a lot of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and plants during the process of photosynthesis transform carbon dioxide into sugars for themselves, and then they breathe out oxygen. We breathe out carbon dioxide, but plants breathe out oxygen. So having plants around you can really up the amount of oxygen that's around you, which is a really positive thing. But also, not just the mass of the plant comes from the air. There was a scientific study done that basically they put this plant in a tiny container, and it grew really, really tall. And I've seen it personally. Like, I've put a sunflower in a teeny tiny pot and then had a 6-foot tall sunflower that's coming out of a 4-inch size pot. Well, where'd all of the stuff that makes up that sunflower come from? It had to come from somewhere. Did it come from the water? A little bit of it came from the water, yeah, but most of the mass of that plant, it didn't come from the soil either, because there wasn't that much soil that it had access to. Most of the mass of that plant came from the air, came from the carbon in the atmosphere, and then becomes plant carbon. And then from plant carbon, it can go to being soil carbon. So the way that the grass roots that I've been talking about work is the grass does its photosynthesis, and then that takes that atmospheric carbon and transforms it into root mass. And then that big, heavy root mass that's under the ground, when it becomes cold outside, the grass will start to go dormant. And as it enters dormancy, the top of it kind of turns brown and dries up, and the bottom of it shrinks down to match the size of the top. Not like match like one for one, but it becomes less robust and sizable. So if you had roots reaching down 12 feet before, they might come back up, die back up to maybe 6 feet or so, something like that. And when the grass enters dormancy, and then the next season, it starts to warm up, the grass wakes up, and it'll start growing roots again. But the previous season's roots, which are down 12 feet in the ground, are starting to decay and be eaten by the soil life. And as they decay, they're locking up that carbon that made those roots. That atmospheric carbon that created the roots becomes locked away deep down in the ground as healthy, nutritious soil. So the scenarios that we're living in, the problems that we're facing can be healed by having this help from the grasses. And people talk about planting trees and doing reforestation as a way to fight climate change. And that's wonderful. We should plant as many trees as we can in the areas where there are forests and there's enough rainfall to support a forest. But there's places where you can't necessarily grow trees because there's not enough rainfall. The reason that our lands are grasslands is because there's not enough rainfall in those areas to naturally support tree species. So they're grasslands.
Hey, this is Nighthawk. Might I interrupt?
Yeah, go for it.
Most of the oxygen on this planet does not come from our rainforests. It comes from our seas. It comes from the ocean.
Uh-huh. But our ocean
I mean, there's no It's that's where it comes from. Most of the oxygen from the planet comes from stuff happening in the ocean. Now, I understand that the rainforest and burning them down is ridiculously a problem. But most of the oxygen coming out is molds and mildews and stuff like that. Those are the things that are eating. They eat the carbon dioxide and turn it back into oxygen. So, all the things that are going on in the oceans that are, and all the destruction, absolute destruction of ocean life is the problem, not, you might want to, say the rainforest and all that kind of thing. So I think the rainforest and the destruction of that is destroying any possibility of medical possibility. But when it comes to all of this and all of our oxygen and the CO2 and all that kind of stuff, I mean, CO2 happens. I mean, we have had volcanoes recently, very recently, have released more CO2 into our atmosphere than human beings have released into the atmosphere in the last 50 years. I think the problem is, with humans is obviously we don't care, but I think we need to stop burning down the rainforest, and we need to stop ruining our ocean sea life. That's where I am.
Yeah, sure. The oceans are important spaces too. And there's a lot of living creatures that are there. And same with the rainforest. But yeah, people that focus on just the rainforest are missing a large part of the picture of the story of life that's happening on this planet. And that's kind of what I'm speaking to about the grasslands, is that they're often overlooked areas of sources of oxygen and sources of carbon sequestration, because we do have a problem in that there is too much carbon dioxide being spit into our atmosphere.
Well, yeah, but yeah, let me ask you a really quick question. The grasslands cannot be replenished unless you have a grazing animal. A grazing animal goes into the grassland, they eat the grassland replenishes itself. The grazing animal takes a crap. It helps and that is the thing that the grassland survives on. The nitrogens or whatever. Let's just call it fertilizer. You see what I'm saying? There is a cycle of life. There is a cycle of life that has been there forever. The problem is the cycle of life is being completely screwed up.
Certainly.
I agree with you in a lot of things that you said. Been listening to the whole show. Hey, Bridgette, I don't listen to your show all the time. A lot of times I'm doing other things, but there is always this cycle of life that's going on. It's always a cycle of life. And, just like, I'm going to be a vegan because I'm not going to be eat meat, or I'm going to be a meat-in, or because I'm going to eat fruit or whatever. It's just, there's always this cycle of life that's going on, and people want to go, I'm a caveman jackass. But it doesn't matter. The cycle of life will always go on. And then once it gets,
the question of whether we're part of it or not.
Yeah.
And how many creatures we take off the face of the earth with us.
Well, I'm not sure where you're going with that or whatever. It's like I'm a meat eater. I'm a hunter. I don't hunt for trophies. I hunt for meat. I have placed myself exactly where I am. I am an omnivore. I eat vegetables and meat, and I got to be honest, I eat more vegetables than meat, but I eat some of it. But I think the big problem here with the environment is that there's just too many people doing too many things, and I don't know. You can take this all how you want. You guys and your listeners can take this how you want, but I think that the human race, whether anybody wants to believe it or not, is, we are simians or monkeys that became a little bit more advanced. So whatever's going on right now and whatever we eat right now is just what we eat. It's like, what do we eat? But the problem is there's just too many of us.
I agree with you, certainly. And I'm 100% on the same page as you in terms of, our grasslands evolved with grazers, and they must have grazing animals. They must have ruminants. The grass needs to be grazed in order to do what it does, which was what I was outlining. It has to have something come eat the top. Otherwise, the top starts to oxidize and release more carbon dioxide than it sinks into the ground. So I totally agree with you on the front of people that believe that they're saving the world by going vegan are just really unfamiliar with the science of grasslands and the art of regenerative grazing. Now, that's not to say that most of the most of the meat that's available on the markets today is raised in a way that's completely detrimental to the environment. A feedlot situation is a terrible situation, and that should not be a thing that exists as the way it does. That meat is certainly ethical, but if you're going to write off all meat, that's inaccurate. There's ways to raise meat that's very beneficial to the environment. There's ways of raising meat that I would say are part of the solution to climate change and part of what we need.
Yes, I very much agree. I mean, I live in the middle of Kentucky. Most of my diet that includes meat is venison that was hunted, grass raised beef that was local. I don't eat beef much anymore. I don't eat chicken much anymore. I don't eat meat much anymore because I don't need it. I'm old. I'm 54 years old. The things that seem to work for me are mostly vegetables and a little bit of meat here and there. But because I'm older. But, when you're younger, you need more of that. People don't seem to understand that, when you're a younger body and being the human beings are designed, and our brains need a certain amount of these anabolic proteins in huge rushes when we're young, and then as we get older, it decreases, and then we could just literally. I'm 54. I could literally probably live on crackers and soup because it doesn't matter anymore. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, that wouldn't work for me when I'm carrying stones and digging holes all the time. I'm having to do some hard work, so I definitely need to eat some red meat sometimes to keep my protein and keep my body going. But I do my best to support my local farmers here in San Marcos. We have River Bottom Farms that does grass-fed, grass-finished beef, and we have Boxcar Farms that raises the pork and chicken. And it's a beautiful thing to know your local farmer, and your food doesn't have to travel across the country multiple times and be processed in factories.
And there is the rub, because it's like chicken right now. Most people that go to the grocery to buy chicken, it was killed. It was grown in America. It was sent to China. They process it there and sent it back. All right, that's a whole bunch of days. That's one of the reasons unless I know where my chicken's coming from, I don't buy it. I have to pay $10 a chicken, but I'd rather pay $10 a chicken as opposed to $6 a chicken for a dead chicken to cook for dinner. Than what I'd have to pay right now to bring it over. Because it's literally, you're talking about a 40-day dead chicken to get that chicken from here to China to processing to back and to come send it home.
Right, and it's artificially cheap. That the cheapness that you see on the tag in the grocery store is subsidized by the destruction of the environment that was part of the production of that chicken. Whether it was, and there's so many ways that can be destructive, right. Like the Tyson chicken factories in Maryland really devastated the Chesapeake Bay with all of the nitrogen runoff from those factories and polluted the water and made it so that the crabs were sick and the watershed there was sick. Right.
And does anyone know? The funny thing is I used to work I had a friend that took me into a factory to show how a chicken was processed, a live chicken. And it was the most frightening thing I ever seen. Okay, so they got a live chicken. They take two things. They take these two things. They clamp them on their legs. They flip them upside down. They run them through this process. They're alive. They run them through this process, and where they get flamethrowed. I mean, literally 1,200 degrees, flamethrowed to burn off all the feathers, all the skin, just about everything. And then they go through and then they dump them in salt water, and then they bring them up, and then they process the chicken. That's how a chicken is processed in America. And then they wrap it up in some kind of plastic sheathing and send it to you.
Yeah, and as a hunter, you know that level of terror that chicken experienced spoils the meat. You can taste that.
Well, you know what? I'm way less interested in the terror of the chicken and way more interested in what the hell. Maybe the terror of the chicken and the chicken got scared. But the chicken is releasing all of these fear chemicals into its body. Now you're eating them.
All right. So we have like 1 minute to go. Can you tell us where to find you?
Yeah, you can find me at bye Nighthawk, good chatting with you. You can find me through my Facebook page, Eco Regen Artisans, EcoRegenArtisans, or you can reach me through email at ecoregenartisans@gmail.com. That's Eco Regen Artisans ARTISANS. Thanks for having me on, Bridget.
Thanks, girl. Thank you. Bye-bye. See everybody next week.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Will you fight? No! We will run! And we will live!
Shame on you! This could be the greatest night of our lives. But you're gonna let it be the worst.
And I guarantee a week won't go by in your life you won't regret walking out, letting them get the best of you.
Well, I'm not going home.
We've got too far!
And I'm gonna stay right here and fight for this lost cause.
A day may come when the courage of men fails, but it is not this day.
The line must be drawn here. This far, no farther.
I'm not saying it's gonna be easy.
You're gonna work harder than you ever worked before.
But that's fine, we'll just get tougher with it.
If a person grits his teeth and shows real determination,
failure is not an option.
That's how winning is done. Believe me when I say
we can break this army here.
And win just one for the Gipper.
But I say to you, what every warrior has known since the beginning of time,
you've got to get mad.
I mean plumb mad dog mean.
If you would be free men, then you must
fight to fulfill that promise. Let us
cut out their living guts 1 inch at a time.
And they will know what we can do.
Let no man forget how menacing we are. We are lions.
You're like a big bear, man.
This is your time.
Seize the day.
Never surrender. Victory or death.
That's the Chicago way.
Who's with me?
Clap! Clap! Don't let him die! Clap!
All right, let's fly! And gentlemen in England, now abed, shall know my name is the Lord. When I tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our Independence Day.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. One world coming together to bring freedom home. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor.